From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Chicago Newsroom right here on Can TV. Magnificent Can TV, the voice of the people of Chicago. So let's begin today, shall we, with a quote from Politico's Natasha Korecki, who writes the Illinois Playbook and was a Sun-Times reporter before that. Here's what she says today in the Playbook. This is a day you'll want to buy hard copies of the Sun-Times and the Tribune, sit down with a large cup of coffee and read. There's that much news. Just not hard news, but impactful investigative pieces that warrant your attention, involving the Chicago Police Department, the Democratic primary race for governor, the future of the Department of Children and Family Services, and the future of Illinois, too. Well, it's all true. After the Trib's major piece on J.B. Pritzker yesterday, his campaign may be in serious jeopardy. The Chicago police may have yet another story on their hands about how they handle their own internal investigations. And of course, America's laughingstock, the state of Illinois, didn't come up with a budget. So, if my old alma mater, Northeastern Illinois University, has to lay off 180 staffers this week, what are they going to have to do if there's a third year without a budget? Well, when you're dealing with all this news and all these newspapers, you got to have somebody from each newspaper, and we got some of the best here today because Mark Brown is back, victorious return lap to Chicago Newsroom. Glad to have you back, Mark. Thank you for being here. Columnist, of course, with Sun-Times. And what is that guy's name? Hal Dardick. That's right, Hal Dardick. At one time, the most oft-visited person on this show. And
did something happen?
No, I think you've just gotten busy or something. I don't know what's happening. You know, we moved out here into the sticks, and it's a little. Yeah. But anyway,
glad to be back.
Very glad to have you back. So, guys, it's one of those days where the Illinois government has fallen even further into disrepute and disrepair, and it's not even the top of the news anymore. So start us off. Mark, you're alphabetically, you're first. So okay. What's the top of the news here?
Well, I got to go with the Sun-Times story is a great story, but since I'm more of a political guy, I've got to talk about the Pritzker story. The Tribune broke a story, and I duly followed up about how back during the Blagojevich investigation, J.B. Pritzker had been recorded on tape talking to Blago, started off talking about the Senate seat seemingly, and then Pritzker said, hey, could you make me state treasurer, in essence. And Blago liked that idea because he was trying to milk people at that time for somebody to give him some sort of parachute to get out of office, or at least to get him some big campaign contributions. Yeah. Pritzker didn't seem to play ball. I don't know that he did anything wrong, but it's, you know, if you're running for governor of Illinois right now, you don't want to be
as a
having
Democrat.
people, as a Democrat, you don't want, or for anything, you don't want to have people spreading around tape recordings of you seemingly conspiring with Blago.
Oh, this is Blago's guy. Yeah.
In a way that the normal folks couldn't do. So it's you know, it's not good.
Yeah. Now, your newspaper obtained these tape recordings from somebody. This wasn't done through FOIA or whatever,
right. These were federal wiretaps that we obtained at the Tribune. I think what's most interesting about these, and you can listen to them online too if you want to. We have most of them. We have a transcript of some of it. But what I think is most interesting is that by this point, you have J.B. Pritzker who has to know that Blagojevich's administration is under investigation by the feds. There's already been someone indicted in the administration. There's been a lot of talk about the campaign contributions and whether they were right or wrong during his tenure. Of course, some of that stuff brought him down. And he continues to talk to him, you know, about, well, who would you appoint to the Senate seat? Says things like, well, if you appoint President Obama's aide, Valerie Jarrett, you know, the reason that's good, Pritzker says, is because then, you know, you might get an appointment. So
he says you ought to get an appointment for that, which, you know.
And the thing that I guess really struck me was that at one point he's asking Pritzker, well, I need money, by the way, for my campaign. Can you help me out? And Pritzker, I don't know if now would be a good time to do that.
Yeah.
But he says, well, you have people that could contribute money, don't you? And Pritzker says, well, I hear you. He didn't say, Rod, I can't do that. It wouldn't be appropriate. So it raises a lot of questions.
He says something like, we can't talk about this until all this other stuff settles down, or something. He just kind of backs away a little bit. Yeah. But it's really interesting to put this into the context of the exact time and dates. These tapes are from when now? Do you remember?
November 2008.
November of
which is 1 month,
so
just weeks before Blagojevich was arrested.
And it's before the election, or it's after the election? Is Obama the president-elect then at this time?
Yes.
Yeah, he must have been,
Yes.
right? Because one of the things, he wanted the treasurer's job because he thought maybe Alexei Giannoulis was going to go, who was the current treasurer, was going to go into the Obama administration. So it must have been right after the election, right?
Right.
Oh, okay.
That's
all
right.
right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, didn't he have some understanding that Blagojevich was really kind of radioactive at this point, and yet he's still kind of having these conversations with him about what he might be able to do?
I think that's why the story raises so many questions. Of course he had to know, and he even refers to that on these tapes. He talks about, with the problems you're having right now, the legal problems that you're having, so he knows about it.
Yeah.
So that between that and a Sun Times story sometime back about how he got an exemption on a mansion,
right.
And here's a guy that seemed to had the momentum, at least among the political class in the state of Illinois. He's got a campaign that's geared up. We're getting press releases every day. He's got the line of the day, and he seems to be gaining all kinds of momentum as the one that's anointed. And now you got these two stories that link him, or at least could be inferred to link him to politics as usual in the state of Illinois.
Yeah.
And I think that it creates questions about whether it's going to halt his momentum.
It, if nothing else, illustrates some pretty questionable judgment about political judgment anyway. I mean, Mark, I know you didn't write the story about the mansion, but it's an incredibly interesting story, and you really have to just kind of ask this thing about. Well, do you understand what happened with the uninhabitable mansion enough to tell us?
I have written about it, and
I'm sorry. Of course you have. Yeah, I apologize.
I feel like I kicked Pritzker pretty good on it, and I've been mostly stunned that he just keeps trying to ignore it.
Yeah.
The basics are, he bought a very pricey mansion on the Gold Coast. And then the mansion next door to his came on the market, and he bought that up too. And then somehow he let it go into he bought it for $3.7 million, which is an important point. So, and now he says, that's an uninhabitable building. And so therefore, since it's uninhabitable, should get my property taxes knocked down. Well, how did it get to be uninhabitable? I mean, he seemingly let it go into disrepair, trashed the building somehow. One of the funny things is they disconnected the toilets, which is, there's proof. You can't even go to the bathroom there, so it's uninhabitable. Right. And it's like, well, why did you do it? It's like no answers. And it may be within the law. The assessor's office says it is. I actually have some question about that. But no matter what, it shouldn't be within the law. And a guy wants to be the governor of Illinois, ought to know that. And he's got the money to pay the taxes. So why not just step up? Hey, I wasn't paying attention to this. I had my brother-in-law handling this building. He does, as a matter of fact. I didn't know that I was getting a tax break on this basis. Maybe, I doubt that he actually did. And
you doubt that he knew that was happening?
Exactly on that basis, I doubt he pays attention to that.
I see. Okay.
I mean, he knew that he knew he was getting a tax break on the building. I feel like that's for sure.
He knew the building was uninhabitable, or at least uninhabited.
He knows what the exact story is of that building, and he's not talking about it. I think he should invite me in. Let me walk around. They talk about water damage. Well, how do you get this?
Can I tag along?
Yeah.
We want to go on our own. We'll try to be nice to the Tribune, who we may, be newspaper brethren soon, but we're still going to fight them. So I think it's just goofy. And now this. This is a different kind of story, but it's a very good story, and I wish we'd have got those tapes.
Yeah, but I still say the same thing, though. It's like, this guy has political ambitions. We know, going all the way back to 2008, he wanted to be appointed to the treasurer's job. He would have taken the Senate job if that was the only thing he could get. He says, I think somehow on the tapes, kind of like something along the lines of, "I want to do public service," or whatever.
Right. Yeah, and that was the answer from his campaign, was he's always been interested in public service, that he didn't do anything wrong in those tapes, and there's nothing demonstrably illegal. He was never implicated in the Blagojevich issue, but it raises these ethical questions, judgment questions.
It sounds almost Nixonian. I am not a crook. I mean,
Well, remember, he had run for Congress just a couple of years before this.
That's right. Yeah.
And so he was in the game. And again, people in politics know when the richest guy in the state is in the game. That works a lot of different ways, but people want your money.
So we had Toni Preckwinkle on the show a week or two ago, and I just said to her, so it looks like there's no need for a primary here because JB has been appointed. He is going to be the nominee. Everybody in your party seems to think so. Is that no longer true? Is he toast? Is he political toast at this point, or what? Does this mean that Kennedy has a shot at it, or somebody else?
I think it puts him at great risk. The interesting thing about Kennedy is he might have been able to step in at this point and say, I should be the party candidate, but he's already come out earlier this week and criticized a number of people in the party and proposed things that would upset Michael Madigan and Joe Barrios, that would affect their income directly, and he's portrayed himself as even though he's a Kennedy, is the outsider. The guy's going to take up and straighten out the Democratic Party. So I don't think he can step in and be the anointed one. Does that mean Daniel Biss could if something happened to Pritzker? But I do think that it sure makes for a much more dynamic race.
Yeah, I will say that, this has damaged Pritzker in my mind, but I got home late last night from trying to recover the Tribune story, right? And my wife had the TV on, and popped a Pritzker ad, and the airwaves are saturated with these commercials, and talking about what a great guy is. And let me say, the things he hits in his commercials, to my knowledge, are by and large true. He put his money, he's used his money well. In early childhood education field, he is by far the guy who is out there the most. He's way ahead of, he basically funds the Rounders on that kind of thing, believe it or not, and all over this country. And so he's considered to be a very substantive guy in that field. And
the tech startups.
The 1871, I'd say it's probably the pride and joy of Chicago right now. And 1871 is J.B. Pritzker's vision, right? And knowing where to put his money. So the guy's got some good things to talk about here. So why doesn't he be smart about stepping up and dealing with these problems? And honestly, I think he's getting really bad advice from his people.
That might be the case. That it may be that,
or maybe stupid.
It's as they say in the news business. Only time will tell.
Well, they came out in one press release yesterday after this happened, and they sort of cast aspersions at the Chicago Tribune. Well, of course, this happens on the day Rauner can't pass his budget, and the Tribune publishes this then, and it's distracting.
Inferring that maybe they leaked the tapes to you or something.
Yeah.
He was still singing that song last night. So
which is absurd.
And these are some of the best reporters in the business did that story. And now he's made enemies of them.
Right.
Well,
it's all just incredibly interesting. But it seems to me like Kennedy is actually trying to take a shot at maybe being the Bernie Sanders candidate or something, because he's talking about opposing Rauner on the property tax freeze. He wants to change the flat income tax to a graduated income. These are the songs that the CTU and the the sort of the lefties in town have been singing for a long time.
Interesting, though, those are ideas that are shared by all of the candidates in the race. He may have enunciated
Has Pritzker taken that position?
Yeah, he has too, that eventually we need a graduated income tax and that we need to lower the property taxes. But what Kennedy's done that's different is he's said that folks who are in public positions shouldn't be able to do property tax appeals business, which would of course be what Madigan does, and what Ed Burke does on the city council. So he's taken a shot at the honchos of the Democratic Party, and that no other candidate has done.
And then the obvious concluding question is, if it were he, or maybe Kennedy or somebody else, but has anybody really got a shot at Rauner, or can Rauner hang on to that seat?
Well, I think it's clear almost any of them would have a shot at Rauner. They would have to overcome his money and his ability to stay on message and run a very focused campaign that's, just kind of zeroes in on the anger of people towards politicians. Unfortunately for him, at this point, it's pretty clear that a lot of that anger is directed at him. People don't think, he's got anything to show. I certainly don't. So he's beatable, but it's going to be tough for anybody.
It'll be a brutal race. I'm sure of that.
Well, and if Pritzker does prevail, and Pritzker, of course, Rauner's a mere multi-millionaire, and Pritzker's a billionaire, and they're talking about the most expensive gubernatorial race in the history of the United States. And,
I consider Rauner a billionaire, even if he doesn't fess up to that.
You do? You haven't audited him or anything?
No, I would.
I'm trying to take the man at his word. But,
yeah, I will.
Maybe before we just completely dismiss Springfield, we should talk a little bit about what happened and didn't happen there yesterday. No budget deal, but the Senate did pass a budget, though, right?
I give them credit. They passed a budget. They showed it could be done. I think it's something to hang your head on, but they took a real risk in doing that, because now they're hanging out there. They voted for a tax increase, and somebody's going to try to Rauner's going to try to hang that around.
He's already working that.
So the Democrats in the House, didn't want to volunteer for that duty, and I kind of wish they would have, and we'd had a clear, this is how we think we should do it, and this is what they think, but
because then Rauner would have vetoed it, and then that would have put him in an even tighter political spot.
That's why I think.
Perhaps.
But,
it
might have put the Democrats in the spot. That's their philosophy. And in the end, that's.
They were split on that too, as I understand it. There were forces in the House that wanted to go that route, but they didn't prevail.
Didn't prevail.
Yeah.
There's also the whole side thing of Redondo and what happened to her, and how she's a Republican who was negotiating with the Democrats, and Rauner cut her legs off for that. So there's strife within the Republican Party too.
Right, absolutely.
I think they're sort of back into. I think they've circled the wagons again here, on their side. But the bottom line is that they know that he's not going to let them get out there. There definitely are Republicans who would vote for a tax increase, who believe that they're going the wrong direction, but they don't want to get thrown out of office either.
Yeah. It all goes back to the money that he's got to throw around.
Yeah, that's right. You want to talk for a minute or two about this elected school board, because that passed, right? Some things did pass yesterday, and this enables the city of Chicago to have an elected school board in 2023 or 4 or something. It's a few years out, if I remember correctly. But it wasn't until this morning, and I was reading a story about it, that I realized that it is a 20-member board.
That's the version that passed the House. The version that passed the Senate late last night has 15 people, still a lot, but 20 is kind of unwieldy. The problem is that those bills would have to be reconciled at some point. So it's not a bill that can go to the governor yet. And will it go to the governor? Were they just playing to their audiences in the Byzantine ways of Springfield?
Okay,
I don't know. That's very uncertain at this point. I can't imagine, Cullerton let that get out of the Senate. And would he do that if he thought it was really going somewhere, considering his relationship with Rahm Emanuel?
Okay, So
just to say I'm skeptical.
So I mean, I haven't so far seen Rahm Emanuel standing up and screaming and stomping his feet. So it's probably because he kind of understands that, well, this is far off in the future and it's never going to happen, or maybe that, I don't know, maybe that's what it is. 20 people on a school board? Could you imagine covering school board meetings with 20 board members? Every one of them with a constituency?
Well, and I think that's how they designed it, to have all these chopped up constituencies. And
right.
Look, the appointed school board, has felt, I think, to the people in Chicago that it's out of their reach.
Absolutely.
And so this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And if they could overcome the power politics of it, and I did not realize till Hal said that this wasn't a completed piece of legislation.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that it had finally cleared the last hurdle to go to the governor. So that's an old game that gets played where everybody can say they voted for it, but it still doesn't happen.
But they know the thing they voted for doesn't have a chance in hell of ever.
So
right,
yeah,
right.
I didn't realize that's what was happening.
I really just honestly don't understand the bill that changes the school funding formula and whether it's a good thing or not. And I don't blame either of you if you don't have it either, because I don't think it's something that you've been specifically looking at or covering. But it's interesting to note that that's the furthest that's gone in many years to change the school funding.
Well, I would say that Senator Andy Menard, who has worked on this, is one of the bright lights in Springfield. It's a sharp thinker, worked really hard at it from a standpoint of trying to meet the needs of both downstate rural districts like his and the city of Chicago. So if they've come to an agreement, it may not be a perfect agreement, but it's, I got to believe it's a reasonable political compromise. Now, I know the governor's making noises about it does too much for Chicago. I have not been able to analyze that in detail to figure out whether we really are pushing one over, but I got to believe it must be pretty close to what would be good for, it's just good public policy. I think that there really are people looking at it from that point of view.
Yeah,
it's not going to make the suburbs happy, though.
Yeah, well, it holds, as I understand it, and at this point, everybody's still trying to sort it out because it was such a last-minute thing.
I should say that we're recording this show, or should we say committing it to a video file, on Thursday morning, just hours after this all happened, and I don't think there's anybody who fully understands everything that happened. So if we turn out to be giving you misinformation at some point, well, just, give us a pass, okay?
Yeah, it's not like a newspaper can't do a correction. Can you?
That's right.
But as I understand it, it holds harmless the suburban districts, makes sure they get as much money as they were getting, but gives more to these struggling districts that don't have quite the property tax base and have more poor students to educate, and it costs more to do that, obviously. So, but it would be something above the $215 million that CPS, that Ronner vetoed for CPS for its pension payments. I asked Claypool about this the other day. I said, what would satisfy? He says, well, if we got $500 million more, we'd be at parity with the rest of the state by their calculations. So we'll have to see what those numbers actually are. The caveat is, again, the Republicans didn't put any votes on this. It's probably DOA with the governor.
Okay, all right. I want to move on, if we can, to something that, Mark, you've written about, and it's a very emotional issue right now. It's this whole thing, your lead the other day was, I turned this story down because it's just some spat in some neighborhood about some apartment building or something, but it has blown up all over the place. This Jefferson Park building that John Arena wants to build just across from the Jefferson Park station. What's going on?
What is going on? Well, there's a proposal to build a 7-story, 100-unit apartment building that would be 80 of the units would be set aside for low income of one sort or another. And it needs a zoning change to get this done. The alderman supports the project, and there is a hue and cry from the neighborhood that they don't want it. There are public arguments, there are private arguments, there is tempers, and there are people from all over the Northwest Side who've gotten involved in this. On the anti-side, including Alderman Napolitano of the neighboring ward, 41st Ward, right? 41st Ward. And there are people from all over the city that have gotten involved on the side of the pro-forces who, are accusing the anti-forces of being racist. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, there certainly is a racial element that has crept into this. Although people who are on, they argue it's a matter of density. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people would argue that affordable housing, they see the problem of affordable housing as not as racial institute, but as a economics or what's going to happen. It's all the old fights, and it just kind of roared up out of nowhere to me. Now, actually, somebody tried to build this building in another ward, and it had gotten shut down, which is why everybody was geared up when they went into Arenas ward. I didn't realize that at the time.
Well, I mean, as someone who lives not right there, but fairly close to that. It was just really interesting to see that first meeting at the church where there was supposed to be just a routine little community meeting with John Arena, and something like, what was it, 300 or 400 people showed up, and they clearly understood what the issue was, and they were girded for a fight. I want to ask the political question about this. There's a lot to talk about here, but Hal, you cover City Hall every day. What's in this for John Arena? Why is he becoming the tip of the spear on this issue?
Well, John Arena is one of the leaders of the Progressive Reform Caucus, and I think he does see this as the right thing to do. And I think he's a smart alderman and knows what he's doing, but he's also sometimes, and I forget the word that Mark used, stubborn sort.
Stubborn, I was going to use that again.
And I think that's accurate. I think that's an accurate description. John can, he's got a little bit of a temper that shows up sometimes, and he's very certain about himself. And so he hasn't done what some politicians would do to assuage the opponents, compromise. He says, this is right, I'm gonna do it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's gotten him into a little trouble, but it's interesting. The mayor sort of made reference to that after last week's city council meeting, and he said, well, when I do these things, I get community input. Well, Arena has gotten community input, and he's made a decision. Hasn't handled it precisely the way the mayor would, who would find some sort of compromise. But now the mayor's taken a lot of grief. So this issue is broadening from people in the progressive community who say, well, you should have just come out and support the project. You didn't do that. Right. And according to the people that allege racism is involved, the mayor is fostering that sort of
perpetuating the stereotype of
behavior.
Right. I sent you guys yesterday a tweet. I don't even remember how it. I mean, it just is one of these thousands of tweets that comes by from e-viewing, saying, "Hey, national media who are always covering Chicago as the place where we shoot everybody, why don't you come to town and cover Jefferson Park?" So I don't know whether any newsrooms from CNN or the New York Times or anybody saw that, but it just seems to me that this is one of these things that we are, I mean, it may just go away, but I have a feeling that we're in this ramp up into something where this is going to become a national story.
Well, as they come in, maybe we should devote more resources to it first before the national folks come in. But you live up there. A lot of people have written into me to make sure that I know that those areas are more diverse than they used to be, and I do know that.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. Still
it doesn't.
They still don't want it to be too much more diverse, but still, yes. I do know that, and so.
Well, there are so many interesting issues that I sort of fancy myself as somebody who always kind of wanted to be an urban planner, and never got the chance. But this whole movement toward transit-oriented development to me is a major issue, and cities like Chicago need to increase density. I mean, we are not a dense enough city at this point. We're losing population. There's the racial component to that. There's a lot of things, but when you see the development that's happened along the Blue Line on Milwaukee Avenue with these larger buildings that are going in, I know many people hate them, but the fact of the matter is that there are now more people living in those communities. They're engaged in the communities. They're using transit. They're generally speaking not bringing cars into the community, at least not as many. So there's a lot of positive things to be done by this. And this building that they're talking about is what? A little more than a block away from Jefferson Park Station. It's across the street from the police station. It's pretty much isolated by railroad tracks and major roads and everything else. So it's not exactly something that one would need to fear, I would think, but there you go.
But fear, and that's why I think makes it a broader story, maybe what this person was implying with the tweet, is and these things go on everywhere in the country,
Mm-hmm.
Tensions
Right.
about income and race, and it's an explanatory story about human behavior, right?
Yeah, it sure is.
I wonder if he had just gone in with, you're talking about transit-oriented development, if he'd done a market rate building like that first,
Right.
and then come in with this, would he have had an easier sell?
Well, you know that there is a
I know,
block
there's another
away
one.
from
I
that.
know,
There's a
there's another
16-story building that he's been fighting the community on for however many years, and that one I think just got approved. I think it just got the building permit on that one, so that's going to be. They're calling it Arena Tower or something. It's going to be a big.
Well, and behind this is a guy that's run against him twice, who's a Republican, Police Lieutenant Garrido, right? Who is sort of fomenting, so that he's going to get himself in another political battle for sure. But he prevailed last time. So.
Yeah. Well, the Arena Garrido battle just never stops. It just runs all.
Garrido said he won't run again, but we'll see.
We'll see what happens. Well, anyway, but again, I'm just fascinated by the fact that Arena has just kind of taken this position. And didn't these guys do something? They had a stand up at City Hall talking about 5 other aldermen volunteering to have, I've forgotten the numbers, but to have low-income housing
Yeah,
units.
they all said that they would, try to foster these sort of developments in their community because it's good for the city. It fights the history of segregation. I think, and I don't want to belittle what they said, but it's easier for some of those aldermen to say that because they already live in more integrated communities. But they're standing by him.
There is a whisper campaign that Arena is doing this because he wants to run for some higher office, and I made some calls on that, and there is some truth that, there's been discussions, I guess, for something, but I don't attribute it that way. I don't say that's how it's going. But that first off, there is a whisper campaign, and maybe there's a shred that he does have ambition.
It's interesting. I mean, we're talking about a Chicago alderman here. Chicago aldermen aren't supposed to put themselves out there like that. But anyway, it's
well, he's always been elected. I mean, Ward's always been it's close battles, right?
Yeah.
And so, has he has he made his voters mad, or has he just made the people who were always voting against him?
Always against him anyway, yeah. Well, you are watching Chicago Newsroom here on CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis, and our guests today are Mark Brown from the Chicago Sun-Times and Hal Dardick from the Chicago Tribune. Currently competitors, hopefully for a good long time competitors, because I guess they're talking about now a couple more extra days because there may be somebody else interested in buying your newspaper. So we'll see what happens, huh?
Yeah, so we never thrill a minute at Sun-Times. We never know where we're going next.
Yeah.
But we keep on fighting.
You do, and I admire it immensely, and I know actually a lot of people at the Tribune
Well,
do too.
the competition's good for the public. It's good for us. It keeps me on my toes. I know that.
Well, I mean, we're talking about, at the opening of the show, Natasha Korecki said, look at this big story that the Sun-Times broke this morning and this big story that the Tribune broke this morning. I am proud to live in a city that has two really viable daily, I won't even call them newspapers, metropolitan news operations, newsrooms, because I value the newsroom more than the printed product at this point. And we gotta make sure that those two newsrooms hang around for a good long time. That's my view, anyway. That's not exactly a controversial position to take, is it? Let's see, what are we talking about here? There's another story that's just kind of like filtering along at the lower levels that I think is going to become very big in the next few weeks. And it's this story about all of the unions that have their contracts up. Dear viewer, you may remember, let's take you back in time. It's 2007, about a decade ago. The big crash hasn't happened yet. And a guy named Richard M. Daley, he was our mayor back then. You may not remember if you're younger, but he was our mayor. And he announced that we were going to get, it was a sure thing, we were going to get the 2016 Olympics right here in Chicago. It was going to be big. They tore down an entire hospital just so they could put the housing in there. And it didn't happen. But because the mayor was so convinced that he was going to get that morning shot on Today, sitting somewhere on the lakefront with the city in front of him, this beautiful city, and he didn't want to have any picketers running into the camera saying, the police and the pipe fitters, we don't like you, you're unfair to us. So I think it's reasonable to say that he just kind of set up a whole bunch of pretty cool contracts with a bunch of unions, right?
Right.
And they're all coming due now because he made them 10-year contracts.
Yeah, the Inspector General Joe Ferguson put out a report yesterday morning, pointing out that all these contracts are coming due. And they're also coming due at a time where some of the contracts that weren't 10-year contracts, police and fire, the biggest contracts, are also coming due. So all these contracts, 44 of them, either came due last June or are coming due all but one this June and then one in December. 44 contracts representing more than 90% of a workforce of 32,000 plus people.
So that's why the, what's his name, the mayor's lawyer, why he quit just recently.
Yeah, the timing was good, and he'll have more free time, I think. But it's interesting because those contracts you refer to, which are most of these 44 contracts that Daley approved in 07 and last through June of this year, had really nice raises in them at a time when maybe he thought the city could afford it. As you say, it was at the end of the boom before the housing bubble burst and everything came crashing down. And since that time, the consumer price index has increased 11-point-something%, the cost of living, and the salary increases they got came in at about 27-28% over that 10 years. So they did very well.
So they're like up there with reporters.
Right, and they're yeah, sure. and they also pay less for health insurance. And I'm not knocking it. They got the best deal that they could.
It's a contract, right? They got a contract. Yeah.
But Joe Ferguson is pointing out, well, there's a lot of things you can do. Maybe peg those increases to the consumer price index in the future, have provisions to reopen these contracts, maybe instead of paying prevailing wages to all the workers, in other words, what people get paid in the open market, maybe they don't need that because they have secure 40-hour-a-week, 52 weeks a year employment, whereas people in the private sector can't be assured of that. But he takes on all of these sort of sacred cows of the union. Jorge Ramirez, who is president of the Chicago Federation of Labor, was very critical
I could imagine.
of the report and tried to explain why prevailing wages are a good thing and ensures a better workforce. But you're going to see a lot of this talk, and it could save the city tens of millions of dollars, if not more, if they did take on some of these sort of cherished perks.
But these contracts are up like real soon, right?
Some of them are already up.
Wow.
About 5 of them came due last June 30th, but they're still under negotiation.
Oh, okay. All right.
The police and fire come up this June 30th, and along with all those contracts that
what
were
a
approved in 07. One was extended till December, but that's just a little later this year.
I think that from what I read of the report, I mean, it's the big opportunity here is on work rules.
Yeah.
I don't. It's not that whatever the negotiations are over wages and all that. I mean, there's issues of when people get overtime, when they get time due. As I recall, there were a lot of work rule things pointed out in Rahm's first transition report, but they haven't been able to get at this stuff. So here's their opportunity to get at them. But it's still it's a collective bargaining situation, and it's not going to be that easy. But maybe maybe the Inspector General has given Rahm some room to play hardball here.
Oh, he's like giving cover. He's the first one to bring it up. So
but I don't see them getting rid of prevailing wages. Maybe, I don't know.
That debate's been going on as long as I've lived in Chicago.
We're trying to fight. The Democrats are trying to fight that one with Rauner. Then if they gave,
Yeah, there's so many different work rules. It's dizzying. The preferential pay for certain positions, acting up. In other words, doing things that are supposedly above your pay grade. And you have to have you could get a PhD in this stuff.
But you could save a lot of money there.
Yes, I agree.
And that's.
But the thing.
The other thing I think we have to mention is the police contract and the discipline.
That's right.
Issue.
Because in a way, if you want, you can spend a lot of time talking to the plumbers about whether they get this amount or that amount, or whether they have to work 8 hours or 7.5, whatever it is. But the real battle has got to be with the police department, right? I mean, that's
as efforts are made to reform the department, to give public confidence that misconduct allegations are thoroughly investigated, and that when wrongdoing is found, that people are actually appropriately disciplined. That was the Justice Department, the Mayor's Task Force, all talked about how these rules give police, they give them 24 hours, which some people allege gives police time to collude and get their stories straight.
Right,
and there's a whole bunch of other things that they think impedes the proper investigation of these things and reduces confidence in the police department. And I think it's something that the mayor, politically, if he wants to run again, has to address.
It's the whole thing about the Police Accountability Task Force, right? I mean, many of these were recommendations made by his own accountability task force, and he said publicly, I'm going to implement this, and then according to Lori Lightfoot, he implemented about 30% of it, but the tough stuff hasn't been done at all, and some of them are these things that they've had. It's kind of like what you were saying, Mark. A lot of it is in the contract, so it's like, well, okay, now's the time, right?
Well, and so one of the problems is that at some points the previous FOP president had said, well, if you want any of that, you're going to have to buy it. In other words, you're going to have to give us more money.
Yeah.
I think the current FOP president is of the opinion that you got to give them the money and those rules are you can't touch them. So so there could be some issues there.
Yeah, I know from conversations with folks at City Hall at fairly high levels that they're not quite sure how to approach these negotiations yet with the new FOP.
I'm sure.
And labor law is kind of tricky. You can't you can't just, oh, well, this is the right thing, so you have to do it. It's, there's trade-offs, and if it goes, the FOP, the police contract usually goes to arbitration, right? And it's you can't always get what you want. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and state law too plays some role. Things that are fixed in state law, and if you want to change them, you got to go to the highly functional General Assembly.
Oh, God help us all. So, the implications for police reform are very serious in this, because we've been hearing, as I said, for so long that a lot of this has to do with the contract. Now, if I recall, didn't the City Council Black Caucus make some statements about this? They said, we are not going to vote for this contract unless certain of these job definitions
Yeah,
are
they
changed.
did. They held a press conference, and Alderman Sawyer, who's the leader of that caucus, said, we're not going to vote for this unless it includes these kind of discipline reforms and things that we think will restore trust in the community. They wanted a role in actually negotiating the contract, which is kind of tough to do. It's an administrative function, but they made their voices heard on that. When push comes to shove, some of these African American aldermen are pretty loyal to the mayor. Will they buck him? I don't think so.
They're in a tough
Well,
position.
they're going to need him to do something that at least makes a show
Absolutely.
of delivering.
Because they represent, the Black Caucus does represent almost all of the black wards and black population in Chicago. So if they're standing up and saying, we are not going to do this unless you do this, and then the mayor just says, forget it, it's not going to happen, they are in a really tough spot.
Yeah, but as Hal says, their natural inclination is to stick with the mayor. So they're hoping they'll give them something so that they don't have to
Can you stick
go
with
there.
the mayor when what you're talking about is the Laquan McDonald tape? That's really what's still hanging in the air, right? Is the aftermath of that and the way it was handled, and the Black Caucus wants that kind of stuff
Mark's
changed.
at least is right that the mayor has to at least get something.
From
Some
the police.
change that they can at least portray as a substantial change, so that the Black Caucus members can sit down and say, well, look.
So that's the way it's going to go down. The mayor will talk frankly with the police and say, look, you got to give me something. And they give him something, and he says to the black alderman, well, I got something. And they say, okay, we're with you.
Yeah, that sounds plausible.
Welcome to Chicago. Well, welcome to any negotiation.
But he's going to have to, it's not something he's going to sell there. It's something he's going to have to be able to sell to the city.
Right. Because he's got to run
Because
for
these
re-election.
aldermen are getting pushed by activist groups that are stronger than they've ever dealt with before.
But on the other hand, he has a constituency, I'm sure, a large constituency that feels, hey, we don't want you messing with the police. We want the police to be left alone. So who knows? All right, we've run out of time. Anything important that we've missed?
That's
Want to talk Trump?
no. The other thing that's interesting that's going on in Springfield is the Thompson Center sale.
Oh, that's right.
Where the once beautiful, much reviled in some quarters building that houses state government downtown, built by the great Helmut Jahn, and it's in huge disrepair. The governor wants to sell it. The mayor's not opposed, and they got a bill.
He J.B. Pritzker the building. They're just making it uninhabitable.
There you go. And it's probably maybe even closer to truth in this case, but it is sort of disintegrating, and you just go there and look at it. But this bill got passed by the House and the Senate, and it would allow the state to sell the building. Ronner, interestingly, so far has been opposed to that bill, and I think this is sort of fascinating. Wants control over the zoning. He wants to upzone it, so to speak, so they can build much more on that property and make it worth far more to the state.
Now you are tampering with
But
the-
here's a governor who has professed to be in favor of local control. What is the ultimate local control issue?
I was going to say you're tampering
As
with
someone
the
that
primal
has
forces.
covered local government for
Right.
30 years, zoning is sacrosanct.
It's all about zoning.
You can't take zoning control away from the local municipal government.
You can't even take it away from the alderman.
Right.
Well, yeah, well, that's another.
Well, I mean, Riley pretty much said it. You can't go do this when I'm going
This is
around
mine.
me.
In Chicago, yeah, yeah.
This is mine and you ain't having it.
Right. So, and it's not to say that, if the governor were to sign this bill, that he can't then go back, and this is the way things are done in the city. If he gets a buyer, the buyer makes a contingent contract and says, I need this zoning,
Right.
and if I
happens
can
every
get
day,
this
right?
zoning,
Right.
that's the way it's done. If I get this zoning, then I'll fork over my $300 million and everybody will be happy. And then they go and they sit down and they hammer it out, and the mayor gets, fees for development in other areas and parks and whatever else, and it's done.
Well, I mean, it's hard to believe that this entire block adjacent to City Hall, wouldn't be upzoned to something more than basically just like an empty box with a few offices hanging around the edges of it. I mean, it is a zoning alderman's.
Right, and there probably is room for give and take there, although the amount that the governor thinks he can get for it, as I understand it, is based on square footage that starts to approximate the, I guess it's called the Willis Tower these days.
Yeah.
And so he's asking for a lot.
It's a big ask. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've exhausted our audience's time. they have to go. You have to go.
If they're left, yeah.
Yeah, no, they're still around, I'm sure. I know you have to go, and so do we. So we'll be back again next week with another show. You've been watching Chicago Newsroom here on CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis. Thanking so much Mark Brown from the Chicago Sun-Times and Hal Dardick from the Chicago Tribune for being with us today. Great conversation. And we'll be back next week with what we hope will be another great conversation. Remember, you can go to this address any old time and watch this and any of our shows. And also, I strongly encourage SoundCloud.com. Go to SoundCloud and then type in Chicago Newsroom, and you can see all of our shows there as audio podcasts, essentially. But they're just, you can listen to them on your phone with your earbuds. It's because this was a good radio show, wasn't it? It was an okay
Yeah, not
radio.
nothing to look at. So.
Well, I sure ain't. All right, enough. We got to go. Bye. See you next week. See you later.